guys. Thank you guys for subscribing and viewing my videos. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe, comment, like, and give me feedback. I'd really appreciate your feedback in this channel. In this video, I wanna open up a bit so that you can get to know me in terms of what I actually do. If you've watched my previous videos, you might be aware that I studied law and I am an admitted attorney, and I'm gonna tell you a bit about the kind of law that I get to do on a daily basis, and I hope this helps you in your journey as well in selecting the area of practice you would like to get into in future. I had a great interest in constitutional law, and I also was doing very well in my other electives in final year, like insolvency and intellectual property. But I also took environmental law as an elective in final year, which really influenced my decision in terms of what I wanted to practice in after university. And then I ended up applying for firms that specialize in mining, enviro, planning, and land development matters, and that is how I ended up at a firm actually specializing in land development, planning, and environmental law. So I'm gonna give you a brief about those three fields. And so with regards to planning law, I also had no idea basically in varsity about planning law. We did property, but we didn't get deep into planning law. Got introduced into this field and was just amazed at the kind of work that you actually get to do. And this is in line with your rezoning, your subdivisions, your township establishments, and just your property rights. And it takes cognizance of, amongst others, your environmental right and your right to adequate housing and special justice. So if you know the history of planning in South Africa, you had certain people that lived in good areas, and then you had a group of others that lived in a separate and different area. So now this legislation comes and regulates planning entirely and takes into account things like sustainable development, which is an important thing, because then development has to be integrated. It must take into account your social, economic, and environmental rights. So that is what it actually does. And your main legislation here would be the Spatial Planning and Land Use Management Act. I hope that gives you a brief background of what it is that I actually do, but I think I will make an example at the end of the video about what it actually looks like. The second thing that I get to do mostly at the office is engage with environmental law or environmental law cases, and the main legislation here is NEMA, which is the National Environmental Management Act. And so the National Environmental Management Act regulates the cooperative environmental governance. And the main thing here is that you cannot undertake certain activities without environmental authorizations. So and how do you go about regulating that? For example, if you were going to build next to a wetland, there are rules regarding that. How do you go about establishing something next to a wetland, or is it even permitted, And then I think, again, to just re-emphasize, it's about making sure that if there's development, it is socially, environmentally, and economically sustainable. So it actually recognizes your Section 24 right, your right to an environment, and it encompasses a lot of things. I remember at school when we did environmental law, it encompasses your right to adequate housing, your right to service delivery, the right to air quality and service delivery, in the sense that your environment is not great, it's not conducive to live in if there's maybe sewage just passing through your home, for example. So it's a lot of rights that are actually encompassed in your environmental right, a very important right that I definitely like advocating for. So another aspect of planning and enviro law that we get to do is Petroleum Law, and this one is regulated by the Petroleum Products Act, and it's mostly about governing measures for saving petroleum products and the maintaining of price, amongst other things. And here you have a lot of filling station developments, and here's the example that I spoke about that I would do earlier on, about how all of these interlink. And there's many other pieces of legislation that come into play, and that's because the law does not work in isolation, you get me? Like, eventually contract comes into play and many pieces of legislation comes into play. So the example that I'm going to give is for a development of a filling station. For example, you might need 3 authorizations. Your land use rights might need to be in order, and this is where the Special Planning and Land Use Management Act comes into play. And you might need an environmental authorization, and this is where the National Environmental Management Act comes into play. And you need a site and retail license, and this is where the Petroleum Products Act comes into play. So basically your land use rights is that you cannot, for example, you decide that when you want to develop a filling station, go Kruger National Park, you get me? Although you have them, but there's procedures in terms of how you can go about doing that, because that area is not zoned for development of filling station, etc. Or even at a residential area, the zoning is for you to have dwelling units, or to have homes for families and stuff. So you're very careful in terms of how you plan that environment, and you need to take into account traffic and the safety of the people in the area. So those are the kind of things. So you cannot just go around and do that. So you need to obtain the correct rights, and you do an application to the municipality, and then you obtain those rights. But that would not be the end of the story. Again, let's say you're developing this next to a wetland or a Kruger National Park, you will need an environmental authorization, because you will trigger listed activities. Listed activities might include when removing a vegetation, because you know a Kruger National Park, it's mainly vegetation and animals, and you might find that there's natural water courses there that you're going to impact on. And in terms of NEMA, you need to ensure how you are going to do a development that is environmentally friendly. But this is just subsurface stuff. It's just surface level stuff. It's not, I'm not going deep into what the law actually says. And this is an example. It's not legal advice as a belief. Do not take this and use it as legal advice. It's not. Lastly, you might need a site. You will actually need a site and retail license, and that you do in terms of the Petroleum Products Act, because again, you cannot just go and open a filling station without the authorization from a Department of Energy. Anyway, that was what this video was about, to give you a brief of the kind of law I engage with on a daily. And it's very interesting. It's always different. Every single time you think you know something, then there's something new. 1, 2, 3, you think, oh wow, I've done a lot of this and this and that, and then there's something new. It's always interesting. And I think with all fields, law is always interesting. It's always developing. You're always making the law. So yeah, that was what this video is about. Please don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. And I would like to hear what it is that you would like to specialize in. Thank you. Goodbye.